The stranger offered Claire his hand just as her ex-husband raised a champagne glass to humiliate her. "Pretend you're my wife and dance with me," he said. Claire Bennett looked from the broad hand in front of her to the man standing beside the empty chair. Luca Moretti wore a black tuxedo with no shine to it, as if even the fabric understood restraint. He was 42, tall and controlled, with silver beginning at his temples and a thin scar near his left eyebrow. Half the ballroom had been watching him since he arrived. The other half had been pretending not to. Everyone in Chicago knew the Moretti name. Restaurants, warehouses, construction contracts, and whispers that grew quieter whenever Luca entered a room. Across the polished floor, Daniel Quinn still held his glass. Her ex-husband had been invited because he represented the groom's company, though Claire suspected he had accepted for the pleasure of being seen in a room where she was alone. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm light over white roses and gold-rimmed plates. A violin sang above the clink of silverware. Claire could smell beeswax, perfume, and the rosemary pinned into the centerpieces she had designed for her younger sister Natalie's wedding. Daniel smiled toward her table. "To second chances," he said loudly, his eyes finding Claire, "and to knowing when someone is worth showing up for." Laughter fluttered uncertainly. Claire's fingers closed around the stem of her water glass. 8 years earlier, Daniel had left her with a 6-month-old daughter, a stack of unpaid bills, and a note on the kitchen counter. Now he stood beside a woman in emerald silk and spoke as though abandonment were a lesson Claire had failed to learn. Luca did not look at Daniel. "One song," he said. His voice was low enough that only she could hear. "You stop sitting there like his verdict matters, and I stop a woman near the band from introducing me to her daughter for the 4th time." Claire almost laughed. That irritated her, because she had spent the evening refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her crack. "You expect people to believe I'm your wife. I expect them to believe what we show them." The band shifted into a slow, smoky standard. Luca waited. He did not grab her wrist, lean closer, or turn the invitation into an order. His hand stayed open. Claire thought of her daughter, Rosie, asleep at home beneath glow-in-the-dark stars. She thought of the flower shop she had opened with borrowed money and stubbornness. She thought of all the years she had carried groceries, feverish children, broken sinks, and court forms without anyone offering a hand. Then she placed her fingers in his. A ripple passed through the room as Luca led her onto the floor. His palms settled at the center of her back, careful and warm through the thin blue silk of her dress. The polished wood was cool beneath her shoes. Claire heard Daniel stop speaking. "You dance well for a man who terrifies wedding guests," she murmured. "My mother believed fear was no excuse for bad manners." "Is your mother here?" "She died 6 years ago." The answer changed the air between them. Claire felt it in the slight tightening of his hand, then in the way he released the tension before the next turn. Near the bandstand, an older man with white hair watched them with open displeasure. Beside him stood a poised brunette in a red gown, her expression sharp enough to cut glass. "Your matchmaking problem?" Claire asked. "Worse. Dominic Caruso. He wants a partnership. His daughter Bianca is meant to make it permanent. And you brought a fake wife to a wedding instead of saying no?" "I have said no. Men like Dominic hear refusal as negotiation." Claire followed his lead through a slow turn. "And men like you?" Luca's gaze held hers. "I am trying to hear it the first time." The song ended, but the room remained strangely quiet. Daniel set down his glass. Dominic Caruso started toward them. Luca's hand shifted from Claire's back to her left hand. "Mrs. Moretti," Dominic said, stopping close enough that Claire caught the scent of cigar smoke in his jacket. "Luca has hidden you well." Claire felt the entire ballroom listening. Luca did not squeeze her fingers or signal what to say. He had put the choice back in her hands. She smiled. "A good marriage needs privacy." Dominic's eyes narrowed. Bianca's red mouth curved without warmth. Then Natalie called for the cake cutting. Music rose, and the room broke into motion. Luca bent toward Claire, his breath warm against her ear. "You just changed the balance of my family." Claire pulled her hand from his. "You said one song." "I did. Then the song is over." She walked away before he could answer, but when she reached her table, Daniel was no longer smiling. By 9 the next morning, a photograph of Claire and Luca was everywhere. It showed his hand at her waist, her face tilted toward his, and Dominic Caruso watching from behind them. The headline beneath it read, Chicago's most private bachelor reveals secret wife. Claire stared at the screen in the back room of Bennett Bloom's while the refrigerator compressor hummed and buckets of wet peonies scented the cool air. Sunlight striped the concrete floor. Her assistant had already asked whether she needed the day off. 2 suppliers had sent congratulations. Natalie had called 6 times. The bell over the front door rang. Lucas stepped inside carrying no guards, no flowers, and no visible apology. In daylight, his charcoal overcoat made him look less like a wedding rumor and more like a man accustomed to being obeyed. Claire held up her phone. Fix it. I can deny it. Good. The denial will tell Caruso you lied to his face. He will use that humiliation against you before he uses it against me. A cold line formed beneath Claire's ribs. Is that a threat? No. It is why I came alone. He set a folder on the work table between pruning shears and green ribbon. Inside were property records, a purchase agreement, and a notice dated 3 days earlier. The building that housed Bennett Bloom's had been sold to a shell company connected to Dominic Caruso. Her lease could be terminated in 30 days. The paper smelled faintly of toner. Claire read it twice while the refrigerator fan rattled. You knew about this at the wedding. I learned this morning. And now you want me to keep pretending. I want to buy you time and end his leverage. I will transfer this building into a neighborhood trust whether you help me or not. Claire looked up sharply. Why? Because he chose your livelihood to punish me. You don't get to rescue me from a fire your name started. No, Luca's voice softened. But I can stop feeding it. He explained that Dominic wanted Luca to merge 2 family organizations through a public engagement to Bianca. Luca had spent 4 years pulling Moretti money out of illegal businesses and into legitimate freight, restaurants, and housing. Dominic viewed the change as weakness. The photograph made Luca look married, and under the old family agreements, a marriage ended Dominic's claim without a direct challenge that could fracture loyalties. Claire paced past shelves of vases. Rain tapped the front window, carrying the metallic smell of the elevated tracks into the shop. How long? Until the city redevelopment vote in 12 days. Dominic needs Moretti support to control the river warehouses. If he believes you are my wife, he cannot offer Bianca as the price of peace. I can move the honest contracts beyond his reach. And if I say no, I issue the denial, protect this building, and keep you out of it. She studied him. Daniel had always made help feel like a hook. Luca placed an exit beside every offer, and that made him harder to dismiss. Claire opened the folder again. 3 appearances. No lies involving my daughter. No guards inside my home. No decisions about my business without me. Agreed. And you will never call me Mrs. Moretti when we are alone. Something almost amused moved through his eyes. Agreed, Claire. Their first appearance was a luncheon at the Lakeshore Children's Fund, where Claire had donated floral arrangements for years. Camera shutters clicked like insects as they entered the glass atrium together. The winter sun flashed off Lake Michigan, turning the water hard and silver. Luca kept one hand lightly at Claire's elbow, never steering. At their table, city officials asked how they had met. Claire felt the lie rise like dry bread in her throat. At a wedding, Luca said before she had to answer. She was the only person in the room who did not want anything from me. Claire glanced at him. That part, at least, was true. After lunch, a councilman named Harris cornered Luca near a marble column. Claire stood close enough to hear Harris demand a larger consulting payment before supporting the warehouse conversion. Luca's face went still. 2 men at the edge of the room straightened. Claire touched Luca's sleeve. You promised me honest contracts. Harris looked at her with the dismissive patience men reserved for women they considered decorative. This is business, Mrs. Moretti. Claire turned to him, then conducted in daylight. The atrium smelled of coffee and lemon polish. A microphone squealed on stage. For one suspended second, Luca could have silenced her with a look. Instead, he stepped away from Harris. The payment is withdrawn, Lucas said. The redevelopment proposal will be published in full by 5 o'clock. Vote on the merits. Harris's face reddened. Luca walked Claire toward the elevators while whispers chased them over the marble. You just lost a vote, she said. I kept a promise. The elevator doors closed, sealing them into a box of brass and dim light. Claire could hear his breathing, slow but not easy. Does doing the right thing always make you look that angry? No. Sometimes it makes me look worse. Her laugh escaped before she could stop it. Luca looked at her, and for the first time the controlled line of his mouth broke into a real smile. That evening, he came to Bennett Bloom's to help move arrangements for a hospital fundraiser. His driver was delayed, so Luca removed his coat, rolled up his sleeves, and carried galvanized buckets through the alley himself. Cold wind pushed the smell of snow and diesel between the brick walls. Claire watched him lift 30 pounds of hydrangeas as if he had been waiting all day for work that made sense. Rosie arrived early with the sitter, her purple backpack bouncing between her shoulders. She stopped when she saw Luca. "Are you the pretend husband?" Claire nearly dropped a box of candles. Luca crouched so he was level with the 8-year-old. "Only in public." Rosie considered this. "Mom says pretending gets complicated." "Your mother is right." "Are you complicated?" "Yes." Rosie nodded, satisfied by the honesty, and went to the office to finish her spelling homework. Claire stared at Luca. "You handled that too well. I had a younger brother who asked dangerous questions at dinner." The warmth in his voice vanished as quickly as it came. Claire noticed, but before she could ask, a black sedan stopped across the street. Bianca Caruso stepped out in a cream coat, her heels clicking over salt-streaked pavement. She entered the shop and ran one gloved finger over a vase. "Dominic knows there is no marriage license." The room seemed to lose heat. Bianca looked at Claire, not Luca. "He will expose you at Saturday's family dinner. When he does, every promise Luca made to change his organization disappears. The men waiting for him to fail will choose my father." "Why tell me?" Claire asked. "Because I do not want to marry him either." Luca's jaw tightened. Bianca met his eyes. "You should have trusted her with the whole truth." After she left, the bell chimed into silence. Claire folded her arms. "What whole truth?" Luca looked toward the office where Rosie was sounding out words under her breath. "My authority is conditional. If the marriage is false, the old council can remove me before the redevelopment vote and replace you with someone Dominic controls." "Yes. You made me the lock on a door without telling me what was behind it. I thought knowing would make you a target. Not knowing made me useful." Claire's words landed harder than shouting. Luca lowered his gaze. She handed him his coat. "Go." Saturday's family dinner took place in a private room above Moretti's oldest restaurant, where the walls were dark walnut and the air carried garlic, red wine, and wood smoke. Claire had not planned to attend. She changed her mind after the city posted Luca's redevelopment proposal. Every contract was public, the flower shop building was listed for a community trust, and Harris's secret consulting fee had been documented as rejected. Luca had done what he promised even after she sent him away. She arrived in a navy dress with rain shining on her shoulders. Conversation stopped. Dominic sat at the far end of the table beneath a portrait of Luca's grandfather. Bianca sat beside him, pale and rigid. Luca rose. "Claire, you do not have to be here." "I know." Dominic placed a copy of the marriage registry on the table. Then perhaps she came to explain why there is no record. Silverware lay untouched on white linen. A fire snapped in the hearth. Claire could feel 20 people measuring her fear. "We are not legally married," she said. A murmur rolled around the room. Dominic smiled. "Then Luca lied." "No," Claire said. "Luca asked me for one dance. The rest of you built a marriage because a man and a woman looked at each other without calculating the price." Dominic's smile faded. Luca stepped beside her. "The arrangement is over. Claire owes this family nothing." An older uncle demanded that Luca announce an engagement to Bianca before midnight or surrender control to his cousin Enzo. Luca did not look at Dominic, the council, or the portrait behind them. He looked only at Claire. "No engagement," he said. "No forced alliance. Enzo can take the chair." The words struck the table like a dropped glass. Claire's breath caught. Luca had spent years changing the Moretti organization, and he had surrendered it rather than turn her into another bargain. Enzo stood slowly, triumph bright in his eyes. Dominic lifted his wine. Luca reached for Claire's coat. "Let's go." Outside, rain silvered the street and restaurant heat steamed from the grates. Claire followed him beneath the awning, where traffic hissed over wet pavement. "You gave it up," she said. "I gave up the right to make decisions for people who never chose me." "What happens now?" "Enzo signs Dominic's warehouse deal. The community trust may fail. I will fight it in court with what remains mine." Claire searched his face. "Why didn't you tell me you could lose everything?" "Because I knew what you would do." "What?" "Stay out of guilt." The rain drummed above them. Claire touched the lapel of his coat. feeling cold wool beneath her palm. I'm still here. Luca's hand rose to her cheek, then stopped an inch away. Claire closed the distance herself. Their first kiss was quiet, almost cautious. It tasted of rain and the coffee Luca had not finished. When they parted, the city noise rushed back around them. This does not make me your wife, Claire whispered. No. It does not even make me your girlfriend. No. She kissed him again. Good. For 3 days, they built something with no name. Luca spent mornings with attorneys challenging the warehouse deal and evenings at the flower shop, where he repaired a warped cabinet badly enough that Claire made him redo it. Rosie taught him a card game and accused him of letting her win. He denied it with such dignity that Claire laughed until her eyes watered. In the quiet after Rosie went to bed, Claire and Luca sat on the shop floor eating takeout from cartons. The radiators clanged. Damp eucalyptus perfumed the air. Luca told her about his brother, Matteo, who had died 5 years earlier after Luca sent him to negotiate with men Luca should never have trusted. There were no graphic details, only the unbearable fact that Matteo had called twice that night, and Luca had not answered because he wanted his brother to prove himself. I thought love meant making him strong, Luca said, turning a wooden chopstick between his fingers. I learned too late that control and protection can wear the same coat. Claire told him about Daniel's departures, the first apology, the second promise, the final note. She admitted she had kept the note for years, not because she wanted him back, but because anger felt safer when it had handwriting. What did you do with it? Luca asked. Burned it in a soup pot. Did that help? It ruined the pot. His laugh filled the dark shop, low and surprised. Claire rested her head against his shoulder. For a while, the refrigerator motor and distant train were the only sounds. The next morning, the front window shattered before dawn. No one was hurt. A brick lay among rose petals and glittering glass, wrapped in a copy of the warehouse proposal. The winter air poured into the shop, carrying exhaust and the bitter smell of street salt. Rosie stood at the top of the back stairs in her pajamas, clutching the railing. Claire's body moved before thought. She blocked Rosie's view, called the police, and pulled the security gate closed. Luca arrived 10 minutes later with 2 men and fury in every line of him. He stopped at the threshold when Claire raised her hand. No guards inside, she said. Claire, you promised. His gaze went to Rosie, then to the broken window. He ordered his men to remain outside. The police found no usable prints. Enzo denied involvement. Dominic sent flowers, a gesture so polished it felt like an insult. Luca wanted Claire, and Rosie moved to one of his secured properties. Claire refused. He wanted an armed car outside the school. She refused that too. This is what your world does, she said in the alley behind the shop. Snow began to fall, melting against her hair. It turns every room into a place where someone has to stand watch. I am trying to leave that world, but it has not left you. Luca flinched. The alley smelled of wet cardboard and pine branches from discarded wreaths. Claire pressed both hands over her face, then lowered them. Rosie saw the glass. She asked whether pretending you were my husband made bad people angry. I will make sure no one comes near you again. That is another promise built from control. What do you want me to do? The question was raw, stripped of command. Claire looked at him through the falling snow. Step back. He went still. She wanted him to argue. Part of her needed him to prove he could not let go. Instead, Luca nodded once. All right. He left without touching her. The days that followed felt louder in his absence. Hammers struck plywood over the broken window. Customers spoke in gentle voices. Rosie stopped asking when Luca would visit. Claire threw herself into Valentine's Day orders while the city moved toward the redevelopment vote. Enzo and Dominic announced a joint warehouse corporation. Councilman Harris praised it as a victory for jobs. The community trust disappeared from the proposal. Then a courier delivered a packet from Luca's attorney. Luca had sold his controlling interest in 3 Moretti restaurants. The proceeds had paid the remaining mortgage on Claire's building and transferred it into a permanent trust governed by the neighborhood merchants. No Moretti company retained ownership. Attached was a statement Luca planned to give federal investigators detailing Dominic's extortion and Enzo's fraudulent contracts. His cooperation would likely destroy what remained of his influence and could expose him to charges for decisions made years before. There was no note to Claire. That absence mattered more than a love letter would have. He had not done it to bring her back. He had done it because he had finally learned that protection without choice was another kind of cage. Claire found him that evening in the empty ballroom where they had first danced. The wedding decorations were gone. Work lights cast pale circles across the floor, and stacked chairs made long shadows against the walls. A custodian's radio murmured from the hallway. The room smelled of floor wax and dust. Lucas stood near the bandstand, waiting to meet an attorney. He looked tired, his tie loosened, his scar stark under the white light. "You transferred the building," Claire said. "It belongs to the trust. You sold the restaurants. They were assets I could move before Enzo froze them. You are testifying." "Yes." "You could go to prison. For some things, yes. My attorney believes cooperation and the absence of violent charges will matter, but I do not control the outcome." Claire walked closer. Her heels echoed where the band had played. "Why didn't you tell me? You asked me to step back. I asked you to stop deciding for me." He absorbed that. "I am still learning the difference." Claire's throat tightened. "Rosie misses you." His eyes closed briefly. "So do I," she said. Luca looked at her as though hope were the most dangerous thing he had faced. Claire stopped within reach, but did not touch him. "I cannot promise this will be easy. I cannot promise I will never be afraid of your past. But I will not let fear make every decision for me either." "What are you saying?" "I am saying you do not get to disappear nobly and call it love." A slow breath left him. "You gave me a choice at the wedding," Claire continued. "Give me one now." Luca held out his hand. No music played. No guests watched. Claire placed her fingers in his, and they moved together across the bare floor while the custodian's radio whispered through static. Luca's other hand settled at her waist. Claire rested her cheek near his shoulder and listened to the steady beat beneath his shirt. When the song on the distant radio ended, neither of them let go. Dominic moved before Luca could testify. 2 days before the city vote, Caruso attorneys filed emergency documents claiming the neighborhood trust was fraudulent and that Claire had accepted the building as payment for impersonating Luca's wife. News vans lined the curb outside Bennett Bloom's. Microphones crowded the sidewalk. The air smelled of hot cables, coffee, and thawing snow. Daniel appeared among the reporters. He had been hired as a consultant for the Warehouse Corporation, and he carried copies of old custody filings. He told cameras that Claire had a history of unstable choices and implied she had endangered Rosie for money. Claire watched from inside the shop, one hand flat on the work table. Luca stood several feet away, honoring the distance she had requested even now. "I can have him removed," he said. "No. He is using your daughter." "I know." Her fear did not vanish. It changed shape. Claire walked outside. The February wind cut through her coat. Camera lights turned the sidewalk white. Daniel smiled with the confidence of a man who believed he still knew where she would break. Claire faced the microphones. "I did pretend to be Luca Moretti's wife for one dance. I did it because my ex-husband was using my sister's wedding to shame me, and because Luca asked instead of ordering." Daniel's smile thinned. "The building was not payment," Claire continued. "The trust documents give me no private ownership. Every merchant on this block has a vote. Mr. Caruso's company, however, forged my signature on a lease termination dated before the wedding." She lifted the original lease ledger from her shop safe. Daniel's old firm had notarized the renewal, and his own initials appeared beside the authentic signature. The forged document filed by Caruso used a signature copied from Claire's floral invoice. A reporter asked Daniel whether he had reviewed the filing. He stepped backward. Luca's attorneys used the discrepancy to obtain an investigation. Bianca, freed from the threatened engagement, provided emails showing her father's plan to manufacture the scandal. Councilman Harris admitted the consulting demand after learning it had been recorded in the glass atrium security system. Enzo's warehouse vote collapsed by noon. Dominic was arrested on fraud and extortion charges without a shot fired. Enzo resigned from the company board and left the city. Luca gave his statement anyway. Claire waited in a courthouse corridor while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and vending machine coffee cooled between her hands. Luca emerged after 6 hours with his attorney. He looked older, but lighter. The cooperation agreement required restitution, 5 years of federal supervision, and permanent separation from every Moretti enterprise tied to illegal activity. He would not go to prison unless he violated the agreement. Outside, snow had turned to rain. Luca stopped beneath the courthouse steps. "I no longer have the restaurants," he said, "or the family chair, or the house by the lake." Claire handed him the cold coffee. You still have terrible carpentry skills. He stared at the cup, then laughed. She took his free hand. We can work with that. Luca did not move into Claire's home. He rented an apartment 3 blocks away and learned the ordinary discipline of showing up without taking over. He attended Rosie's school play and sat in the second row, where she could find him without searching. He took a job managing logistics for a company that knew every detail of his cooperation agreement. He started therapy for grief he had mistaken for duty. Claire did not become softer to make loving him easier. She asked questions. She challenged silence. When Luca slipped into command, she raised one eyebrow until he started again as a request. Spring opened along the lake in silver blue mornings. The boarded window at Bennett Bloom's was replaced with clear glass. Merchants planted window boxes beneath it, and the community trust renovated 2 vacant storefronts for a bakery and a childcare cooperative. On Sundays, Luca helped sweep the sidewalk while Rosie drew chalk flowers around his shoes. A year after the first dance, Natalie and her husband hosted an anniversary dinner in the same ballroom. The chandeliers glowed like captured stars. White roses scented the room, but Claire had added rosemary again, because memory deserved both sweetness and bite. Luca arrived without an entourage. His navy suit fit him beautifully, though Rosie had chosen his tie and insisted on a small silver pattern that looked, from a distance, like falling rain. Claire wore a deep blue dress. She sat at the same table where he had found her, but the chair beside her was no longer empty. When the band began the song from the wedding, Luca stood. Rosie grinned from between Natalie and the cake table. Ask her right this time. Luca reached into his pocket, but Claire touched his wrist. Dance first, she said. He smiled and offered his hand. Claire Bennett, will you dance with me as the woman I love? That depends. On what? Are you still complicated? Yes. Good. They stepped onto the floor. Warm light moved over Luca's face. The band's brass notes curled through the room, soft and sure. Around them, glasses chimed and shoes whispered over polished wood. Halfway through the song, Luca lowered himself to one knee. He did not make a speech about rescue or destiny. He simply opened a small ring box and looked up at her. I spent most of my life believing love was something a man protected by force, he said. You taught me it is something 2 people protect by telling the truth. Will you marry me? Claire saw Rosie pressing both hands over her mouth. She saw Natalie crying openly. She saw the scar near Luca's eyebrow, the silver at his temples, and the uncertainty he no longer tried to hide. Yes, she said, but no pretending. Their wedding took place 6 months later in the courtyard behind Bennett Bloom's. The neighborhood merchants hung strings of warm lights between the brick buildings. Rosemary and white roses filled simple glass jars. Rosie carried the rings in the pocket of her yellow dress because she did not trust a pillow. Luca's vows were brief. Claire's were not. She promised honesty before comfort, partnership before appearances, and the courage to ask for help before loneliness became a habit. When the music began, Luca held out his hand. This time, Claire did not need an enemy watching, a room whispering, or a lie to make her brave. She stepped into his arms as his wife, and the dance they had borrowed finally became their own.